Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio. Should I say bonjour? I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live and on demand from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where I've been here attending the Elimination Chamber premium live event. And I'm joined, as always, as usual, by Chris Gullo, who's below me in this Brady bunch, and by Jesse Collins. We're not in Montreal, but they're joining me remote, as usual. Hello.
We got like the NHL, like Atlantic Division. You got the Bruins, the Sabres, the Canadians. It's like that triangle effect there.
Yep, Brandon. You're a star due to your press conference performance last night.
I was not seated with media. I did pay for a ticket last night, and I was seated way up in like the 300s. It's interesting. The Bell Center has like a 300 section has stacked right on top of it a 400 section. Anyway, I was up in the 300s, and I had my plan all set out. I knew there was a meeting point that we were supposed to meet at for the press conference immediately after the show was over. I did a dry run, making sure that I could sprint down the stairs and quickly and efficiently get to the meeting point. But I did that, but then apparently people were gathered even while the main event was happening, and they were getting ready to be escorted. So anyway, I was very confused, and I didn't know where everybody went. But in fact, WPR was very helpful, and they found me and escorted me to the press conference, and I sat there for like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden I was asking a question, and so I did.
Yeah, and I thought you asked a really good question. Thought it was
Cool.
I thought we got a very interesting answer out of it.
Yeah.
Yes. So I guess if we could talk about it now, why not? So I asked, what did I asked Paul Levesque whether he thought what were you in favor of a WWE sale before Vince made his return, and are you in favor of one now? I don't know that he really answered the question, but we do have the text here. I made Gullo type it up early this morning here, and if I find the text. He says, it depends. It depends on who's buying, what the offer is, what the outcome is. I stay out of it. To me, and that's not a cop-out answer, I have the greatest gig in the world. I helped tonight in some small way create to me what we did here tonight, and to me it's the best gig on the planet. As long as we get to do this, as long as we get to create it the way we want to create it, as long as we get to do our jobs, and we get to go out there and put our passion on display, as long as our talent are allowed to put their passion on display and do what we do, I'm good. It is what it is. That is the comment from Paul Levesque on a WWE sale. Did we learn anything from that?
We learned that he's not involved. According to him, he's not involved in the sale really at all. That's what he says. He is on the board of directors, so you would think one would think that he has to be involved in some capacity, but
he did at least present for some conversations, I would think.
Right. So he clearly, at least from this is now, and the reason you asked this question, Brandon, is this is now his public stance on the issue, is that he's staying out of it, and that he also doesn't seem to be too bothered by who would potentially purchase WWE, as long as basically he's allowed to keep his position. That's basically what he said. I thought the last bit when he said it is what it is, he kind of said that like after he said everything else, like he kind of like sat back and then he like leaned into the mic and kind of like was like, it is what it is. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it kind of seemed
You're decoding that. What did you read into that?
I mean, it could mean nothing, obviously, but I just thought the way he said it, it came across like he was kind of resigned to the fact that he had little authority over what was going to happen and he can't change it, so he's just kind of accepting it. That's just, I mean, could be totally wrong, but that's how I got from like his body language.
It did occur to me that like, I guess actually I could have asked, okay, are there some suitors that you prefer more than others, or vice versa? Because like, I guess you could read to this response as long as we get to do this, as long as we get to create it the way we want to create it. So are you saying that there are some plausible situations in which your creativity would be limited?
Right. Is there potential buyers that you wouldn't be that excited about because your creativity would be limited? And what does that mean? If it's bought by a company that doesn't care if Vince is in charge of creative, then does that mean Paul Levesque is no longer in power the way he wants to be? Does it mean that he would prefer someone that would want nothing to do with Vince? So Vince could sell the company and then go on his merry way, and then Paul Levesque would be in charge of the company under new ownership. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good question. I thought you tied it into kind of like, Vince's return to the board of directors, which he didn't really address at all. He didn't address Vince at all in the answer, but I thought it's easily, Brandon, easily the best question that's ever been asked at these WWE pressers.
Well, I do it to impress you, Jesse.
I knew that's what it was for. I knew, like, Brandon was like, I got to do this for Jesse.
Yes, it's just mainly to get your approval.
Let's see if somebody will take Brandon's lead now, and like now we'll have further questions on Triple H. Like, who does he want to have it? Like you guys said, to stay in power as chief counsel.
Yeah, and I thought in like Triple H's response, like, did he answer the question fully? No, but he wasn't like nasty about it. He didn't like say, "Get this guy out of here," because he asked a difficult question. Like, some people might, I don't know, think that that's what would happen. But
well, that was some of the facial expressions.
Yeah, but he was prepared. But he was prepared to give a answer. He had clearly expected that this may potentially occur to him. So the idea that like Brandon asked and I don't even consider it it wasn't a gotcha question. It wasn't an accusatory question. It was simply a sale, which is all public knowledge and something that he is able to comment on. And he gave an answer. It wasn't like this big, it was like Brandon was maybe you were, maybe we didn't see that on camera. You were not escorted out of the room briskly by security.
No, everyone was polite with me. Yeah.
I mean, what other opportunity are you going to get to ask Triple H about his thoughts on the sale? So, in that aspect, it's a good question. Not like he's available all the time to answer questions like that.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I understand he's the chief content officer and he's the head of creative, and perhaps that's where the vast majority of his time and energy goes into. And he's on the board of directors. How involved is he in these sort of high level business strategy decisions and strategic alternatives? Maybe not so much as some other members. And I think one thing we haven't focused on enough in talking about this story of a possible sale is, what does a possible sale mean for, all WWE employees, including the lead executives like Paul Levesque and Nick Khan, for that matter. Whoever, plausibly, somebody's going to buy this company, maybe, and they can install their own executives at their own whim, and that may mean an uncertain future for anybody in this company. And if there's a merger or an acquisition where there are synergies in the workforce, then that could mean a lot of people getting laid off, because that's why you do mergers is to keep your costs down. Yeah. And I think it raises a question about, is Nick Khan really incentivized to help it make a deal happen? I think there are mixed incentives for him. There's an incentive on one hand of wanting to be the person who is partly responsible for making a great company transaction that is great for shareholders. It's a great story. But I think there's also a risk for him in that who you make a deal with, if a deal is made, does that suitor want to keep you in charge, or they want to put their own person in charge? Seems unclear to me in that, so it seems like a lot of uncertainty to me. Okay, I guess that was our lead story here. So, did you guys watch Elimination Chamber? Did you get a chance to see it? I don't care if you did or not.
I watched the main event.
I also watched the main event. I sat down at 8:00. I had plans, but the plans fell through. I sat down at 8:00, and I was like, should I watch Elimination Chamber? And I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can stand the pacing of the show, because I really only care about the main event, and I think I'm going to be really annoyed by like 2.5 hours into the show before we get to the main event. So I watched the movie Tar instead, and that wrapped up right about as the main event started. So it's like, all right, cool, time to turn on the main event, and that's how I spent my Saturday night.
I was performing last night, going head to head with most of Elimination Chamber until I got home at ready for the main event myself. So
Yeah, also well timed.
yeah,
So this show ended up going. I mean, there was, you know, mercifully no pre-show. I got in my seat at 8 o'clock. I know they did a kickoff show in the arena, but that was just a talk show. It seemed to be going along pretty quickly. I mean, this show started at 8, but it ended. I mean, that main event didn't end until, especially with all the stuff that happened afterward with Kevin Owens and all that. I don't think that ended until, I would guess, around 11:15, 11:20 or something like that. So it did. This was a over 4 hour show, but only 5 matches. I was, I was kind of surprised when I first looked at the card that's it. There's only 5 matches, but obviously you had two long Elimination Chamber matches. The main event was very long. I as a viewer, I guess I prefer fewer matches rather than more. And it seems like there have been a lot of, especially in the direct to consumer network era, where I think executives were incentivized via their bonuses to make these shows longer, because the more watch time that accumulated, the greater their bonuses. And that it's not the only thing that played into their bonuses, but it was a factor among others. So I think there were in the pre-Peacock era of the network, there was an incentive by leadership to make these shows quite long. So I attended a SummerSlam in 2016 in Brooklyn, and it was, I think, like a 5 hour long show. I think I sat down at like 6 a.m. and I didn't leave until 11 or something like that. So I prefer a shorter show for sure.
And it helps, like with WWE at least, like the downtime in between matches is when the show is pacing. I think can get really frustrating because there'll be a ton of vignettes and backstage segments and recap videos and live musical performances and all these things that as a fan I don't really care about. And when you stick to a show that only has 5 matches but the matches are longer, that means you're getting like way more in-ring time and less fluff in between the matches and things like that, which helps.
And there was quite a bit of fluff in between the matches, and there were video packages. There were at least 3 video packages, each for Ronda Rousey, I think for Ronda Rousey, for Cody, for Bianca Belair, and for The Miz in between each of these matches. All each person who was not on this show, I guess, just because you have this audience here that's probably fairly large, and it was just, they were just personality pieces really. So that was put in between matches, as well as the video packages for the match you're about to see and all that. But yeah, I don't know. We're not going to review content here, but the main event was what I expected it to be in terms of this atmosphere and this extremely rabid Montreal crowd cheering for Sami Zayn. I guess as a memory and an image, one of the things that I'll remember really well is, I think, the first haluva kick that Sami hits. I think it's before there's ref bumps and all that. He hits this haluva kick, and Montreal is ready to buy it. And I've never felt this before, is where you hit the 1, 2, and you can almost feel the entire venue like rise up and like peer in down on the ring, like they were going to lose their minds if that was the finish, and then nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I thought the match itself was very entertaining because of the audience. It felt lively, it felt energetic. I was intriguing to see what decision WWE was going to make and how they were going to go about it. I guess the one thing I'll ask you, as someone that was in the building, what did you feel like the atmosphere was like when Sami lost? Did you feel like the audience was frustrated? It was kind of hard to tell. Like, it went silent on TV, but then when Kevin Owens came out, it kind of like felt like it got them back into it. But what was kind of the atmosphere like when Sami lost, and then also like exiting the building? You said, I mean, maybe you didn't see that because you were
I was like, finish happened, and I was a few seconds later leaving my seat, but I was walking around and I was running downstairs. I do remember like thinking about that as I'm like racing through the concourse here and like sort of looking at people's faces. I guess I would just say they were deflated. I think there's a conversation to be had about what did that doing that finish do to the Montreal market. And I mean, clearly it was deflating and it disappointed people. You could go to the extreme and say they killed the territory, and now when they go back to Montreal, they're not going to draw much because their hero lost in this big match, which is something that Vince creative did religiously was pound hometown people down on TV. But yeah, it was I'm sure deflating for a lot of people, and this is something that Sami Zayn talked about somewhat in the press conference in terms of he talked about he could see pain in people's faces and stuff like that. So
my impression on this show, Elimination Chamber, I don't know if we'll really get like accurate viewing data from it, but maybe I don't know. Have you checked the Google Trends for it? I would imagine that this show had a lot of interest compared to a normal like B pay-per-view for WWE. That's the sense that I got. Just anecdotally, I felt like I saw a lot of people who maybe would only tune in for the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania were checking this show out because they were into the Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns feud. And the impression I got was that they were frustrated that this was kind of the typical way that WWE has handled these things in the past, which is beating the guy the fans wanted to win. A lot of interference, the two ref bumps, very, sports entertainment-y style finish. It was all things that I kind of expected as a fan, but I do think that this was a real opportunity, not just in the Montreal market, but in the broader sense to teach fans that, hey, WWE is different now. Look at this great storyline. Look at this big payoff we're going to deliver. Look at how much the fans are going to love it. And the fact that they kind of balked at that, I think it'll be interesting to see, because the Sami Zayn stuff was over. Attendance was very strong. Ratings were very strong, this last month or even going further back. What kind of impact does Sami losing, and kind of it looks like Sami going to be moving on to a lesser feud with the Usos. What kind of impact does that have on SmackDown's ratings? What kind of impact does that have on the company? Because I did think this was a big opportunity to kind of send a strong message to fans who are maybe returning to the product after a few years away, that this is going to be different, and the fact that they delivered on something that was very similar to what Vince McMahon would do. And maybe that's a sign of something else, but I thought it was a missed opportunity.
So did you have something go?
I was just gonna say, like, kind of go back to the press conference with this. I feel like somebody else could have asked too, like, clearly the fans are behind Sami Zayn. Like, where do you, Triple H, see his spot at WrestleMania? Because I think that's going to cause some backlash when it is what we're thinking is just a tag match that he's going to be in. So,
I mean, I expected the finish that we got was Roman retaining, probably because, I mean, at least for me as a fan, I get wanting to do. I mean, what scenario do you have for WrestleMania if Sami Zayn wins? I guess he faces Cody, and then what do you do with Roman? I think that it's a stronger card in the end if you have Owens and Sami Zayn against the Usos and Roman against Cody. And I think Roman Reigns holding this title for so long creates a value that is, for like the last 20 years, has been foreign to WWE. But anyway, the TV rating, we have the fast affiliate TV rating for SmackDown on Friday, and it did okay. This was not another big rating, but let's see here. We have the fast affiliate, and I've, of course, have done a projection on what I think the final is going to be that will come out. I think it will come out on Friday afternoon. I don't think President's Day is a Nielsen holiday, but it was the prelim measured, the fast affiliate measured 2.254 million viewers, and it's usually lately it's about 5.5% higher than that, so that would be 2.38 million viewers. So this would be close to the level of 2 weeks ago, but not one of these big ratings that we've seen in recent history, like the pre-Royal Rumble number or the John Cena December 30th number, but another decent rating. I would have to look.
Yeah, and look at the trend since like December versus where they were at previously. There's obviously momentum that's there with Sami Zayn, and I don't think Roman was on this SmackDown, correct?
He might have had a bad. No, I did watch most of SmackDown. He was not. I don't think his face appeared in new content.
Right. So I don't want to go as far as like totally dismiss Roman as like Roman's presence is a key part of this angle, obviously, But this is a Sami Zayn interest in Sami Zayn, interest in Sami Zayn potentially winning the title driven story that I think has really pumped up SmackDown's viewership over the last it's really since kind of December. Um, and to that extent, I wonder like where do they return? Obviously you're building up to WrestleMania, so the viewership should be up. But now that fans see Sami Zayn slotted at a lesser level, what kind of
Yeah.
impact does that have on it? Does that hurt what has been a very strong ratings trend for SmackDown over the last month or so?
Yeah, I don't think I could say in the time that I've been writing about wrestling, I guess so we're saying 2015 forward, I don't think I could say I've been able to look at TV ratings and say, wow, TV ratings are up because it's got to be because this one storyline is really connecting. And that's what I see in this SmackDown rating. And I just don't think that that's really ever happened in my sort of in my last 7-8 years of looking at this stuff. So it raises a question about like what was that the right thing to do, and are they going to be able to maintain these ratings? It'll be interesting to watch going forward if there was some investment in Sami Zayn that is, that now that question has been answered, and does that lower the intrigue? Despite, as you said, Jesse, we're building up to WrestleMania, and usually January through March and the post WrestleMania period are a really strong period for ratings, as well as other areas for WWE, including attendance. The attendance from WrestleTix, well, not the attendance, we should probably use the word tickets distributed. The estimate from WrestleTix for Elimination Chamber last night, 14,200. 14,200 is the latest count from Elimination Chamber. Triple H called it the biggest gate in Montreal history for WWE. And that it's slightly higher in tickets distributed than the SmackDown was, which was 13,900. And I think I have it here. I noticed when I was, seated way up, and for people watching on YouTube, this thing right here is the WrestleMania sign. So the WrestleMania sign is sort of obscuring my view of the hard cam area here. But as far as I could tell, it's probably hard to make out. If you're watching video, this right here is the hard cam, or at least one of the hard cams. And I don't think that they were taking out, dozens or hundreds of seats like they usually do to set up the hard cam. There was like a full first bowl section that was full of people in seats, which is very unusual. And people who have attended wrestling events, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where you've got the hard cam side where the hard cam is, and it's all draped off, and there's the hard cam is there. And rather than that, in the Bell Center last night, and I don't know what it was for SmackDown, I didn't attend SmackDown, but the hard cam was stationed in this entrance tunnel. So I wonder if, and I'd be curious to know what SmackDown was like. So I wonder if they were actually able to raise the capacity for this event because of the lack of production kills. Because maybe they positioned the hard cam differently, and I don't know if that's particular because of the way that this venue is set up, or if that was a decision that was made to increase ticket sales, increase inventory. So,
well, I believe the Bell Center is a very large building. To this,
very steep where I was.
Right, like it's like I believe it's got to be, it's probably close to the size of like Rep Arena or the United Center. Like it's big, even like it might be the biggest like arena of its size in like the U.S. and Canada or in North America. Rupp Arena might be a little bit bigger than it, maybe a few other buildings, but it's like I think it seats like 22,000 people for basketball or hockey. So it maybe and because it's primarily a hockey arena, where most buildings like of this size that WWE normally runs is primarily a basketball arena or a basketball and hockey arena. Maybe it has just a different setup. I'm not that sure, but it's because there was demand for it, I assume, like because they knew they could sell those tickets and they wanted to have as many seats as possible to make as much money. So that's why I assume they did it. And it was interesting. Like I think the secondary they distribute a lot of tickets, The secondary market, I think a few days out, was like for the get-in price was $41, which wasn't that much. So the secondary market wasn't super hot, but obviously there's no denying the amount of fans that they put in the building over the 2 nights, almost 30,000 fans if you go by the WrestleTix figures.
Go, have you been Googling
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, so with capacity of 21,105, it is the largest ice hockey arena in the world. So,
21,000, that's for hockey.
yeah.
Wow, okay.
And there's usually more tickets for basketball because the hockey service is bigger. But that it's like, it's significantly larger than like the TD Garden here, or the whatever. I mean, some of them like the United Center are really big, but it's much larger than your standard NBA building, NHL building.
Right. And by the way, if you want to put a super chat in, if you have a question or a comment you would like us to answer or address, feel free to do a super chat if you're watching live on YouTube. I guess we'll move away from Elimination Chamber and go to the other big story this week. Just more follow-up on the WWE potential sale. There was a Bloomberg article that came out this week, which we'll get to. But people still think, this is still a majority view. Well, according to this very scientific Twitter poll, which has 2,500 votes for people who saw this tweet of mine, where I asked, do you think WWE will be sold or merged or taken private sometime this year? Yes, no, or I don't know. And 64% say yes. WWE will be sold or merged or taken private sometime this year. Just 22% saying no and 15% saying I don't know. So that's, 6-2 people in favor of believing that a sale will take place. I'm somewhat skeptical, but anyway, we'll get to why. There's a report from Bloomberg with byline from Lucas Shaw saying that Vince McMahon is asking for $9 billion for WWE. That is his asking price. I don't know that there was a ton of new information in this article. Beyond that, let's see here. The company has already received offers, said the people, this was attributed as, according to people familiar with Vince McMahon's thinking. Imagine being familiar with Vince McMahon's thinking. The company has already received offers, said the people, this is the Bloomberg article, who requested that they not be identified because the discussions are private. WWE declined to comment. Shares were up on Friday. They were up very close to around the time that, so very, very much immediately after this article came out, they shot up to 91 for a moment, but they came, I believe, back down under 90 shortly thereafter. The Bloomberg article writes, the list of potential buyers for the WWE includes Endeavor Holdings Inc., Endeavor Group Holdings Inc., the owner of UFC, as well as investors from the Middle East who have already made major investments in golf and soccer. Endeavor would need financial help from a third party since its market capitalization of $10.4 billion is only a bit more than what McMahon wants. But the company has already shown it can integrate and grow a sports media business with a divisive founder in the UFC, and of course, alluding to Dana White. The article goes on, larger strategic buyers such as Netflix Inc. or Walt Disney Company may be uneasy taking on a business controlled by McMahon that involves the sometimes messy personal lives of its wrestlers, or maybe more so actually their executives. Yet McMahon may not find many buyers eager to pay his price considering the shaky global economy and rising interest rates. A valuation of $9 billion amounts to about 7 times the company's $1.29 billion in sales last year and 23 times its adjusted operating income before depreciation and amortization, both at the high end for the entertainment industry. So I think my opinion about this is that I think in this economic environment, as the article mentions, interest rates are increasing as we kind of enter into this maybe recession, maybe not, but interest rates have increased. And I think a high price like $9 billion probably is only, if that's, I think we should consider why this information got out. Somebody wants this information out. So they want that asking price out. Somebody does. Who knows who? People familiar with Vince McMahon's thinking. So I think that price probably only makes sense for a sovereign wealth company or a sovereign wealth fund like the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which would have not just business interests in owning WWE, but would have another kind of interest, a public relations interest in owning WWE. And I think you can forget any of these major media conglomerates like Comcast buying at that price, especially if that's the price that it takes to get Vince out of control, which I would imagine is a must-have for anybody like Comcast or Disney to take this company over. Besides the risks that just being associated with WWE presents to your brand. I think WWE may be worth $7 billion, depending on the quality, the interest rate, the financing you can get. But WWE as a stock is not a growth stock. It is, as I've learned this terminology, it is a value stock. This is not a company that's going to explode in growth going forward. It has performed very well in the last calendar year, in a time when the indexes did not perform well. But the notion that WWE is going to grow greatly in value over the next several years is less certain. I think the live rights market is strong for WWE for the foreseeable future. I believe they're probably going to get a good deal, 1.5, 1.7x on their next US TV rights deal if they end up directly dealing it. But the horizon of just the value of what TV rights are going to be like for live sports beyond the point of a few years from now is a lot less certain. And I think getting this story out there that Vince is looking for $9 billion sets the stage that, okay, if a sale doesn't happen, we've got this ready-made explanation here of, look, that was our asking price, and we tried really hard to make sure that we got the best value for our shareholders, but nobody wanted to pay it.
Right. If we go back to Nick Khan's comments that we talked about 2 weeks ago, when he said someone asked him, would Vince consider a move that maybe would take him out of a position of power? And what was the words Nick Khan used specifically? He said they would, he would 100% be open to.
He's 100% open. Yes.
Right, and maybe if someone writes him a $9 billion check, that's how he'll be open. That's the kind of deal he'll be open to, but there's no guarantees. And I do think, as we've been following this potential sale since the start of the year, the list of possible candidates that could purchase WWE have been shrinking, it seems like, as far as serious. The first few articles were like, here's Amazon, here's Netflix, here's Disney. And now it really does seem like the only two major ones that really feel like a possibility are Endeavor and are Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And so it does feel like if it does get sold, those are the two that are going to be sold to, and it's possible. Is this a possibility, Brandon? You might know more about this than I, but if Endeavor needs to take on a partner or some sort of outside financing to help with the purchase of WWE, given the $9 billion price tag and Endeavor's limited ability to pay that, could it be possible that Saudi Arabia and Endeavor together purchase the company, and that Saudi Arabia is a major financier, but Endeavor purchases the company?
Yeah, this is something that crossed my mind that I've asked people about, and I don't feel like I have a clear answer yet, but that it seems possible that's maybe that they would cooperate on some sort of transaction to either take WWE private or spin off UFC into WWE. But I think that's something that we should keep on the table as a possibility.
And the other thing is, at the start of the article, it says the company has said they've already gotten offers have been made according to anonymous sources within the company.
The company has already received offers, yes, who requested to not be identified.
Right. If you were going to benefit from WWE's sale, wouldn't it behoove you to tell the media that you have already received some offers?
Who knows what the nature of those offers are? Are they for Vince McMahon's $9 billion asking price? Are they for the pocket change that somebody's got in their pocket?
Right. And This isn't Vince coming out and saying $9 billion. That's what it will take. This is people familiar with Vince's thinking, which I think could describe a very wide range of people, uh, depending on how familiar with this thinking we want to discuss. Um,
Are you familiar with Vince McMahon's thinking? How
well, I said
familiar are you?
I'm like us three talk about Vince's
Did you get
thinking all
this?
the time and have
Are you
studied
behind this?
Vince's thinking. So like, are we familiar? Do we count as being familiar with Vince's thinking? I always thought that I told you guys this separately when the story first came out, but I was like, that's kind of a weird way to describe a source, is people familiar with his thinking. Like, why wouldn't you say people familiar with the sale negotiations, or people familiar with, discussions within this about the sale? It's just people familiar with Vince's thinking. Who could those be? It could be a wide variety of people, but it's kind of a rumor at this point. It's not Vince saying $9 billion, but that's kind of what's been leaked out here.
I mean, given it's Bloomberg, I would assume that the standards are fairly high for what
Yes.
they're publishing without naming the person on the record. Um, you would know better than I would. Like, do you think that there's a policy within Bloomberg about how anonymous attributions like this are made? Like, I would think that this just fits into some category, and they say, okay, we'll call it people familiar with his thing.
I mean, it's very well possible. I'm not super familiar with like Bloomberg's regular articles and their practices, but given the nature of what they tend to cover, which is probably communicating a lot with high-ranking inside officials with major companies, that it's possible that this is a standard form of attribution for sources. Um, to avoid any complications or outing of any sources. And obviously, that's something that they're really reliant upon, given the nature and the things that they report. They need to have connections within the hierarchy of big companies.
So we have this image. I could to say that Vince, if this is assume this is true, that Vince's asking price is $9 billion. Well, I have a beater car that if somebody wanted to pay $20,000, let's say, for my beater car that's got over 100,000 miles on it, yeah, I would consider it. I just raise the bar really high, and but nobody's going to do that, of course.
So you think the $9 billion price tag is far more than the company is probably worth?
Who does it make sense? Why does it make sense to buy WWE at $9 billion? It makes sense. I mean, look, the price of the stock indicates that it's worth $6.5 billion market capitalization. So you're buying it at a $2.5 billion premium if you're buying it for $9 billion. That
And
only
as you
makes
said,
sense if you're a country whose government maybe has some problems with its public relations image and wants to associate itself with sports to improve its image around the world. Because that's not something that Disney needs. That's not something that Comcast needs.
and as you said, like WWE is not a growth stock, so it's not like you're buying, a stock in a tech startup that could explode in value in futures. It's kind of a lot of WWE's revenue is baked in to its guaranteed deals, which showcases some stability, and one of the reasons that the stock price hasn't been as impacted by the economy as other stock prices. But it's not something that you can really bet on making a lot more money over the next few decades.
Right. And so the stock price at the close of the market on Friday was $87.98, almost $88. And I think what's baked into this is a lot of speculation and expectation. I think sometimes over the course of covering WWE stock, I feel like Wall Street has a pretty good handle on the value of WWE, or understands it, this sort of collective economic determination between supply and demand of this stock usually often has a pretty good handle of what the value of the company should be, or at least what the value of the stock should be. And I think we're now at a between my opinion and Wall Street's opinion, it's pretty different right now. I think there's more uncertainty about a sale than this stock price indicates. And if a stock price and if a sale doesn't happen, and I think we should have a pretty good idea within the next 3 months or so, because it's either make a sale in these next 3 months, or if we're not going to make a sale, we have to go deal TV rights. So this stock price may be in for a correction sometime soon. By that I mean it's going to go down, if I'm right.
So that leads to the question: what happens if they don't sell? What happens to Vince McMahon, who came back only to initiate a sale? What happens if they ultimately don't sell? Will that negatively impact the stock price? Will stockholders be upset that a sale was initiated, essentially, but then didn't end up happening?
The stock price will go down, because there's so much speculation baked in about the likelihood that this stock will be sold at a premium. There will be shareholder lawsuits because shareholders will sue and argue that they were misled about the value of this company and believe that you were going to make a sale and you do not genuinely. We accuse you of not genuinely trying to make a sale. I don't know what happens then. Can this company afford more settlements, or are the arguments just not strong enough that WWE can fight that legal battle? I don't feel well positioned to answer that. Mm-hmm. And then I think what happens is WWE makes TV deals, probably at a nice upgrade. Okay, TV deals are done, and then I think until I see evidence that starts to persuade me otherwise, that I think Vince would like to be more involved with this company, perhaps in control of creative. And now with these important business events having happened, TV deal secured, his return and retirement over sexual misconduct allegations sort of complicated now in the past. It's obfuscated in the past, and now he can maybe get the power back that he lost.
Right, and it's kind of like Vince was able to strong arm his way back into the company and get the public to tolerate it and get the stockholders to tolerate it because he announced he was going to put the company up for sale, which maybe led to some people being like, we really don't like that Vince is back in charge, but if he's going to sell the company and help make us a bunch of money, then it's okay. And if it all kind of ends up being a bit of a ruse where Vince said he was going to sell the company, but only for this exaggerated price, and if that price is never met, Vince is just still around, do people get upset about that? You said lawsuits happen. There's already been some signs that people are, stockholders that are frustrated that Vince is back and that Vince, there's already been a couple of lawsuits related to that. So how damaging would this be to, I think, like Vince's ability to be a player in WWE if the sale doesn't happen?
Maybe it just depends on how strong the legal arguments can be made that shareholders were misled. Maybe that's a big part of the answer.
And if I'm the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, if I were to give advice to their investment fund, the public investment fund, I would say if Saudi Arabia is the only prospective buyer that would be okay with Vince having a major role in the company, and Vince has to sell it to someone that would keep him having a major role in the company because that's what he cares about the most. Why would I pay $9 billion for it if I'm the only prospective buyer that can really satisfy what Vince wants?
Unless there are two, which may bring us to our next topic. I hope I have some football fans, not American football fans here, who can help me. Manchester United is another. I should have set it up this way. Did you know that there's a publicly traded company that's a sports league that is being sold right now? Well, there's a sports company that's being sold right now that has the Raine Group helping them make this sale and has interest from sovereign wealth, including the Saudi government. No, I'm not talking about WWE. I'm talking about Manchester United. Are you guys familiar with this story? I've only become aware of this over the weekend, that Manchester United is being shopped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And who's helping them? The same firm, the same financial advisory firm, I think is the right terminology, that is advising WWE on a sale. That is the Raine Group. And this article comes from, let's see here. We have an article coming from a local Manchester publication, Manchester Evening News, that writes Manchester United are up for sale. Excuse me, we're in Europe now. With a diverse list of potential investors registering an interest in acquiring the club, which is one of the most valuable sports brands in the world, there has been talk of an internal takeover in addition to a number of bids being tabled from around the world with interest from the Middle East, USA, a British investor in the form of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, whatever. Whoever chooses to turn their interest into a concrete bid will have until the 10 p.m. deadline to register their interest. The Raine Group is involved. Who are the Raine Group? Any interest which evolves into concrete bids on Friday will be subject to scrutiny from investment banking from the Raine Group. And who could make a bid? There are a number of names in the mix, with United being a huge global brand and wide range of potential suitors. Qatar and Saudi Arabia are both believed to be in the mix, as well as individuals in the form of Ratcliffe and potentially Elon Musk. Two things here. If W is really going to be sold, then I would expect to start to hear about a process like the process that we're hearing surrounding Manchester United, where there's a deadline to get bids in. We've heard nothing about that in relation to WWE at this point. So maybe that is a story that materializes in the weeks and months to come. And I think it's reasonable to think about whether or not the Qatari government, who just hosted the World Cup, might also be interested in owning WWE. And I'm not sure what the international relationship is like between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Obviously, Saudi Arabia and WWE currently have an agreement for their $50 million a year events.
It's not good, Brandon.
It's not good?
No.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I'm not qualified to go into huge detail about the issue, but there is a bit. There's a rivalry between the two nations. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is much larger than Qatar, but they both swim in the same same lake as far as looking to have similar plans, which are to transition away from a petroleum-based economy, and part of that is by helping promote the country's public image, and part of that is by promoting entertainment and buying sports teams. We know the Saudis own, they recently purchased Newcastle United, another Premier League team. They have obviously have a lot of events and soccer events and other sporting events that take place in their country, including the WWE shows.
Made a big bid for the entirety of Formula One.
Yep. Did you know that I learned this week, that the Dakar Rally Race, which was a famous rally car race where they would race from Dakar, Senegal to France, and it's called the Dakar Rally. It's like a race across Africa. That race now takes place in Saudi Arabia. It's still a Dakar Rally, but it's in Saudi Arabia. And Qatar has had similar investments. Qatar owns Paris Saint-Germain, which has now become the biggest soccer team in France, and definitely probably the wealthiest soccer team in the world when it comes to their capacity to spend on things. The United Arab Emirates, which is another player in the Middle East, they own Manchester City, Manchester United's rival club, and also are involved in a lot of other purchases. I mean, anytime a football team, a soccer club comes up for sale, there is consideration from investment from the Middle East. My club, Tottenham Hotspur, is also maybe for sale, maybe part of it is for sale, and I believe the Emirate government is also interested in buying a sizable stake in Tottenham. So this is standard fare for European soccer, for the wealthy sovereign nations, primarily from the Middle East, getting involved in the purchasing of these huge clubs, mainly for clout, it's probably the biggest. It's probably the biggest talking point in like global soccer, as far as like, what does this mean for the game? How does it impact player spending? Is it pricing out other clubs? And it's a massive, massive issue that has constantly been talked about, really since Chelsea was purchased by Roman Abramovich 20 years ago, but more recently when Manchester City was purchased by the Emirate government.
So in your non-professional internal affairs opinion, would the fact that W has, it's 7 years or 3 years into a 10-year deal with the Saudi government to do 2 events a year that glorifies Saudi Arabia, does that present an obstacle for the Qataris wanting to own WWE if they have to absorb this 7 more years of big events in Saudi Arabia twice a year?
That's a good question. I don't know the contractual language of the Saudi Arabia WWE deal. Could it be that if WWE sold, that the new owners could choose to not honor those deals?
Right.
We obviously it would seem foolish because of the amount of revenue that is associated with it. But if you're the Qatar
And what
government,
legal teeth would the Saudis have to enforce a contract if it was owned by another sovereign nation?
right, they could just
Questions
tell them
above my head.
to pound sand. And could they put on the shows and be less glorification of Saudi Arabia? I don't know. I find the Qatari government buying WWE kind of unlikely. Yes, they have the wealth to do it. Is it something that that would interest them? I have no idea. They don't. There's nothing stopping the Qatari government from having their own, having their own WWE come to them and have their own big, pro Qatar shows. I'm sure Nick Khan and Vince McMahon would be very open to another deal similar to
100% open.
yeah, I think they would be. Well, I think they would be a billion% enthusiastic about a potential another deal the size of the Saudi Arabia deal with another country. Maybe the future is just WWE going to 12 different, autocratic nations that are willing to host propaganda shows each year, and that's where every pay-per-view is. But it would seem hard for them to do such a thing. I know. So the Saudi Arabia government allegedly was very annoyed that Qatar got the World Cup. Its little neighbor next door that they don't like somehow managed to get the world's largest sporting event and not them. And Saudi Arabia has now shifted their attempts to host the World Cup themselves as part of a joint bid with both Greece and Egypt. So it'd be like Greece, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia would host the World Cup as some sort of Mediterranean-based World Cup. And I think this week it was reported that Saudi Arabia is willing to fund the entire, construction and infrastructure costs for both Egypt and Greece, to help sweeten their appeal to because they wouldn't want to have it just in Saudi Arabia because that's a bad look. But if FIFA could sell it as this Mediterranean thing, and the Saudis are willing to fund Greece and Egypt's construction costs to make it so that it's not just their propaganda, it's the entire Middle East or Mediterranean area's propaganda show or event. So there's like I said, I don't really know that much about like the actual geopolitical manifestations of these two nations, but I do know that they've been in a bit of a rivalry when it comes to kind of acquiring entertainment talent. Because they're kind of have the same kind of idea, which is how are we going to transition away from our petroleum-based economy as the world shifts away from petroleum as its primary energy source.
I do have some information on that, actually. First off, we got some information in the chat as far as there was a blockade from 2017 to 2021 between the two nations.
Yeah,
but
there was something like Saudi Arabia was actually trying to like cut off because Qatar is the peninsula that I think is attached to Saudi Arabia, and like Saudi Arabia was like the way it was framed to me was that they were literally trying to cut them off from the mainland, like they were trying to turn them into almost like an island nation by blocking that border.
And there's been a struggle for influence between the two, and people often refer to it as the new Arab Cold War. So, if with our Cold War experience, you know how that is. Anything you could do, I could do better.
I don't have any Cold War experience. I'm too young. I just want to put that out there.
So if people don't know, we have a map here that Qatar, if you don't already know, is a small nation that's in the Persian Gulf, and it shares border with Saudi Arabia. So anyway, we will move to MLW versus WWE. No, it's not an interpromotional show coming to reels. It is a lawsuit that is in the Northern District of California. Dismissed. Were some of the headlines that I read. Let's see what's actually happening here. Is the Honorable Edward Davila, who's the judge in this case, has ruled that this case, that the complaint that MLW made just about 1 year ago, has been dismissed. But MLW has, as of February 13th, 21 days, 3 weeks to file an amended complaint. And MLW has Court Bauer, who's the CEO of MLW, has said that our legal team is already at work on amending the complaint, and we have every intention of continuing to pursue our case against WWE. That was a comment that Court Bauer gave to PW Insider. I mean, I wouldn't rule out this case still getting to discovery, which is what a lot of this litigation has become at this point, is an argument between WWE's lawyers and MLW's lawyers about whether or not this case should get to discovery, or whether or not the judge should try to dismiss it before it gets to that point. WWE does not want lots of its records becoming public record, which is what would happen in the discovery process. To get into the details here, the judge wrote a response about why this case was being dismissed, saying, the court finds that MLW has not included sufficient facts to plausibly allege a relevant antitrust product market. And basically what MLW was alleging in their complaint that came out a year ago was that WWE interfered and prevented MLW from making business deals with multiple partners, including Tubi, which MLW claims they were on the eve of making an announcement that MLW content was coming to Chris Gullo's favorite streaming service, Tubi, which is owned by Fox. And according to MLW, WWE interfered in that deal. Tubi is owned by Fox. Fox broadcasts WWE Smackdown. That's the connection there. And according to MLW, Vince McMahon had Susan Levinson, who was at that time the head of WWE Studios. Vince had her call a Vice executive and get the Vice deal that MLW was working on with Vice, get that deal killed. Of course, MLW aired one episode of MLW content on Vice and then aired no more. So MLW was alleging antitrust, and the judge is basically saying here that, that MLW is not making a good enough argument in that respect. So we'll read a little bit more here. Regarding the proposed market, the complaint alleges only that there are 4 competitors in the United States professional wrestling market, that the business of promoting professional wrestling as sports entertainment is fundamentally a media industry with revenues and business valuations driven largely by fees obtained from broadcasting rights deals, and that corporations such as NBCU and Fox, quote, purchase rights in the proposed market for their various distribution channels such as broadcast networks, cable and satellite services, streaming networks, and film production companies, end quote. These facts as pled, this is the judge writing, these facts as pled are not sufficient to provide an understanding of the characteristics of the relevant market, including the existence or the lack of substitutes. For example, there are no allegations addressing why other, quote unquote, sports entertainment or quote unquote media content for which broadcasting rights might be sold to distribution channels are not appropriate substitutes. MLW is correct that a single sport may constitute a relevant market, but there are no facts alleged in the complaint to support the legal conclusion. What does this mean? My interpretation of this is that the judge is saying MLW has to argue why wrestling content is the substitute for wrestling content and other non-wrestling content is not the substitute for wrestling content. And this is a response that WWE has raised to say, in a very WWE way to us, we're not wrestling. We're part of this broader world, which we compete with, and that's why we're not violating antitrust, among other reasons. But yeah, I don't know that we need to go way into the weeds here on more of this, but this may or may not be over. We shall see. Any thoughts here?
No, just that I feel like there's been the original. When we originally heard about this lawsuit, it sounded kind of absurd that WWE would be involved in it at all, in the sense that, like, why would WWE really care that MLW has a TV deal on Tubi? Like, it's not their primary competitor. It's a very small streaming service. Would they really be petty enough to try to squash that? And at least as more information has come out, it does seem to indicate that there's more truth to this than I originally assumed. And it'll be very interesting to see if this does continue. And Court Bauer has said that he's very, enthusiastic about getting their legal team ready for
And he does have a very high-powered, high-profile legal team. He's got Mark Kasowitz's legal firm.
Right, and that was
famous
kind of
for.
one of the first signs that kind of legitimized this, which is like they got a really powerful legal team to work on this, which makes
Which raises questions about how MLW is affording a law firm that is probably so expensive. Maybe it's a pro bono thing. Maybe their investors are involved in that. I don't know.
yeah. Well, there's a strong belief in the validity of it, at least in some way, whether it's pro bono, whether there's investors behind MLW that are willing to pay a lot to get this thing settled because there's a strong belief that they're going to win something out of it.
Okay. And by the way, you can subscribe to Wrestlenomics on Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. This is where I've reported TV ratings just about every weekday, as well as the quarter hours. You get access to the big Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet. You get access to these slides that we're going through right now, among other analysis and reporting. But moving on to NBC, according to CNBC, is interested in getting the NBA back. Of course, NBC used to broadcast the NBA years back. So I think there's some questions here that this raises for wrestling. And CNBC, this is an article from Alex Sherman. They're also reporting that Apple and Amazon have expressed interest in NBA. Basically, there's lots of interest from lots of players. The incumbents are Disney, ESPN, and WBD, TNT. And so the question that this raises, okay, this is good news for the NBA. It's good to have multiple people bidding on your house rather than fewer people bidding on your house. If NBC Universal gets an NBA content, let's experiment here. What channel might that content air on?
USA.
What else is on USA that's interesting to us?
Uh,
Law and Order.
Chrisley knows best.
Chrisley knows best.
Chrisley knows prison's
Yes,
coming
Law and
soon.
Order SVU, but also Raw and NXT, which are occupying primetime slots for Monday and Tuesday right now for the USA Network. There's no more NBC Sports Network, as we know, so that content can't go there. I'm sure high-profile games could go on the NBC Broadcast Network, but where else would that content live other than USA Network?
Can you guys play
And
Round Ball Rock while we're discussing this?
we would get demonetized, I'm sure. That's the NBC NBA theme?
That's the
Is that what that
NBA
is?
on NBC theme song, which Tony Khan has purchased. Yeah, he purchased the rights to, and you now hear it during Dynamite when they're hyping up cards and things like that.
Okay. So, and I think this raises questions for AEW too, in that like David Zaslav, who's the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which controls TNT, he's sort of playing hardball, saying we don't necessarily need the NBA, we don't need sports. It's hard to imagine TNT letting go of the NBA. I think maybe they end up with fewer NBA games than they currently have now. But I think there's questions to think through about if TNT has fewer games, that opens up maybe some time slots for AEW. Or what's come to mind for me recently is that, look at this power slap that everybody's appalled with that's happening after Dynamite. Is that serving, whether intentionally or not, is that serving as some sort of trial run for a relationship between Dana White and WBD? By the way, UFC's TV rights deals, those are expiring in the not too distant future as well. AEW expires if the option is picked up, which we assume that it will be, in December 2024, the end of 2024. NBA expires after the season ends in 2025, around June. And UFC expires at the end of 2025. So the order here goes AEW needs a renewal, NBA needs a renewal, and then UFC needs a renewal. Now, it may happen out of order, who knows? But that's the order of expiration there. It's AEW, NBA, and then UFC. So it's just something to keep in mind. I wouldn't rule out UFC someday being on TNT. And if it does, I would imagine that's probably not a good thing for AEW, because it sucks up more time that maybe WBD would think it's a better strategy to put UFC in certain time slots rather than AEW. Although if you just look at pure ratings, maybe AEW would do better in ratings than UFC at this point, at least. on a general basis.
Yeah, if I could pivot this to like TV rights for wrestling, right? So like, I think the market's going to cool down a little bit for if you consider something second tier. I don't know if you would consider WWE programming second tier sports, but you probably would put AEW in that second tier category. And there was an article this week from Front Office Sports where the Pac-12 TV rights, that it's not a huge market for that right now. Amazon is playing hardball according to them, and Brett McMurphy from Action Network said that Warner Brothers Discovery is completely pulled out of Pac-12
And
rights.
Pac-12, this would be football and
Football
basketball.
and basketball, and you would think that Pac-12, even losing UCLA, USC, would be more valuable than AEW.
Yeah, but that's a depreciating value. Everyone knows the Pac-12. The general belief is that the Pac-12 and some of these other conferences are
Who are the
going
incumbents
to be
for Pac-12? Who has the rights now?
Fox and ESPN, but I think mostly Fox.
Yeah. But the Pac-12, I think, is like an obvious depreciating value in the sense that they're losing USC, they're losing UCLA. What does that happen? Do they lose Stanford next? They're losing you. I mean, I have to imagine USC and UCLA are
Losing
by
their
far
top
their
stars.
biggest. Yeah, that's
Well,
their
they
top
lost the LA
stars.
market, so I mean,
If CM Punk was a college, a sports college, what college would CM Punk be?
CM Punk. He's probably he's not the biggest college, right? So I think USC is actually a good example because USC kind of has a national following to a degree. Maybe UCLA to a less one, but certainly like USC football is something that has fans across the country. But like the Pac-12, but it's a good example of like I think Gullo, you're right, and like these second if we're going to start looking at this big fight for these first tier sports properties like the NBA,
yeah.
Are these ones going to who's going to get squeezed out of that? Because is that going to be AEW? And to me, it's all about the AEW TV deal is all about like what do we consider like a success? Is AEW going to get $300 million per year? Probably not, but how much bigger than $44 million can they get, and what can we use to quantify as a success for AEW's TV deals? We don't really know that, and that's kind of like the question that I'm really thinking about as we get closer and closer to that new television deal, and something I talked about a lot on my podcast with Rich Craich, which was, when this new TV deal does happen, like, does the public have any capacity to understand what a good TV deal is for AEW coming up? Like it's if it's bigger than if it's 100 million, is that good? Is that bad? If it's 150 million, is that good? Is that bad? Is it disappointing?
From a financial standpoint, it needs to be an upgrade that will make them profitable. I don't know what that is.
Right. We don't even know what that would be. Right. We don't know what would make them profitable.
Mm-hmm.
But so
I would think somewhere around 1.5 or 2x is what they would need to be profitable. I would guess,
and which wouldn't be that big of an increase really if they got like a 90 million. If they were getting 90 million a year,
right. This isn't massive money compared to other properties.
Right. But and I think with the if Warner Bros. Discovery does lose the NBA, and I kind of think they won't. Now their management has shaken up before, and there's obviously going to be a lot of bidders. The thing with the NBA, unlike the NFL, is that there's nothing really stopping, and there's a whole other issue with the NBA with its regional markets and the Bally Sports and the Sinclair issues that are going on there. But unlike say the NFL, which has a limited number of games, and every single game that they have is shown on to a national audience to a degree, the NBA has nights where there are no games on national TV right now. The NBA could always add more games to a national slate. So they can cut up their schedule to a degree where they could right now, yes, they have, deal with ESPN and a deal with Warner Bros. Discovery. They could say like, oh, NBC, you want games? We'll just toss you out some Monday night games. You can throw them on NBC primetime if you want on Monday nights. You can do that. Or Amazon, do you want to get involved? You now have Saturday Night Basketball on Amazon. Here you go. Here are some games. Like the NBA has so many games that take place during the season that they can cut it up more than they already have. So it's possible that a lot of these different network entities can share in the pie, if they want, in a way that they can't really in the NFL. Although the NFL has done that too. They moved, Thursday Night Football was just a way for them to get more, another satisfy another bidder. Um, but it's one of those things. I think NBA is too important to Warner Brothers Discovery, and they've made moves in the past. I think they signed Charles Barkley to like a 10-year contract for big money, and
Right.
Barkley said on the Bill Simmons podcast when he talked about signing his new deal, and he said, "Look, they have to keep the NBA, and if they have the NBA, they want me. So this is a sign that they're going to do anything it takes to get the NBA. If they're going to pay me $100 million over 10 years, what are they going to pay to have the actual NBA product?"
And from a business perspective for the TNT network and TBS, they're making money not just from advertising on their TV shows, but also from subscriber fees that they're charging to cable and satellite operators. How are they justifying that? By having lots of highly rated live sports.
Right.
And and we discussed on Thursday, Brandon and I, about the Bally Sports thing, and those more games might become available to just TV rights deals. And then you start to think about more time slots for like an AEW or something like that. Like if they have availability to more NBA content.
Aren't familiar, Bally Sports is an umbrella that owns many regional sports networks, which is where you watch all your local games that are not nationally televised on some place like TNT or TBS or whatever. And those are having lots of financial turmoil right now.
Do you guys have Bally Sports in Buffalo?
No, because we have MSG. That's that streams the Sabres games. Well,
Okay.
airs the Sabres games.
Yeah, it seems to me like more like a Midwest.
Is Nesson its own
thing.
Okay.
What'd you say?
Nesson is its own independent company?
We have two. Yeah, we have Nesson, which is owned by the John Henry, who owns the Red Sox, and they broadcast all the Red Sox and Bruins games. And we also have NBC Sports Boston, which is obviously owned by NBC, and they have the Celtics games.
Okay. We have one more story here, one kicker here. We have some data from the Twitter account TV Grim Reaper, who shared some Nielsen data for the average viewership for the entire week ending February 5th. And that's broken down across various age groups, which we will briefly summarize here. This will go into a lot of detail that if you're a subscriber, you can look at for yourself in the slides. But just to summarize that this is the big thing to me, is that this included not just cable and broadcast networks, but this also included, yes, streaming networks. And the most watched, now it doesn't have every streaming network. I think Paramount was not included in this or something. But the big ones that are, other than Paramount. The most watched network or streaming platform for that week ending February 5th among people aged 2+ was Netflix. And the number 2 among people aged 2+ was YouTube. We have to wait till number 3 to get a linear traditional TV network. Some people may have heard of, called CBS, which is number 3, followed by Amazon, Hulu. Then we get the rest of the networks and Disney. I also have some interesting age breakdowns here we'll go through quickly. So if we look at, let's start with the youngest people of all, teenagers. Like what this is now, this is about skew. This is not about what is the most popular network for this age group, but what is this age group disproportionately watching as a percentage of its viewership, as a percentage of Disney Plus's viewership. What is the biggest percentage of viewership that has viewership from 12 to 17? I'm sure this is the skew. What is this age group over-index the most is probably the best way to put this. Is what is this age group over-index in the most for a network or streaming platform? And the answer for teenagers, 12 to 17, is Disney Plus, followed by Netflix, another streaming company, followed by HBO Max, another streaming platform, followed by Freeform, which I think is a cable network.
Yes, it used to be
Freeform,
it used to be called ABC Family,
which used to be the Family Channel, correct?
Yes.
By Hulu.
But-
Let's go to another age group here. Go ahead.
Freeform specifically aimed at teenagers.
Okay. And then, all right, people 55 and up. What is the network that they skew most heavily in? Well, of course, it's Fox News. 85% of the viewers who are watching Fox News on that week ending February 5th, 85% of them were either 55 years or older. Followed by HGTV, followed by Ion. Do we get a streaming network here in the top? What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's correct me if I'm wrong. There's no streaming network here. It's all traditional TV for people age 50 or older. What about the demo? 18 to 49. Number one is HBO Max in terms of skew. Again, for that age group in general, I believe the answer is, let's see, I guess we don't have it here, but 18 to 34 is Netflix, 18 to 35 is Netflix, so the answer would be Netflix. But what does it skew the most in? It's HBO Max, it's Peacock, Discovery Plus, 3 streaming networks, followed by Comedy Central, a traditional TV network, and Hulu. 18 to 34, it's HBO Max, Hulu, Peacock, Netflix, Disney Plus, YouTube, all streaming networks, and then we get Freeform. People 18 to 34 watching Freeform, and then Comedy Central. And then MTV is back here at number 10. So interesting to see some data from streaming networks, which, you know, people are always looking for, and we have so little data that's public anyway about just how streaming networks and how you know, consumption of watching content through the streaming medium compares to how much people are watching traditional TV. And as we know, through Nielsen's The Gauge, the majority of TV watch time is still traditional TV by a increasingly thin margin. Still traditional TV. But
do you know how they calculate, like, if you're watching traditional TV through a streaming platform?
So like I have Sling, and other people have Hulu Live TV or YouTube TV, where you get traditional TV channels.
Mm-hmm.
In Nielsen's The Gauge, if people are familiar with the donut chart that I don't have in the slides today, you are not counted in the in the cable or broadcast. You're counted in the other streaming category, I think.
Yeah, even if you're watching a cable television or broadcast
Correct.
TV. Yeah, because
Yeah,
I watch Jeopardy sometimes, which is on CBS, and watch it live locally. I don't have cable. I open up Paramount Plus and watch WBZ, which is our local CBS station here in Boston, and I watch.
Now that might be different. I don't know.
Right,
Like,
because
if
I'm
you're-
watching it on a streaming service, but I'm also watching the broadcast TV. It's
Because
just
that's
the
not a
way I
virtual
access it.
MVPD. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not through a coax cable, right?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I have for now. Do you have questions?
Yes, I got a couple super chats here. MJ from NJ just says, proud to support an unbiased journalist / analyst who isn't afraid to ask real questions and respects whether the subject answers or doesn't answer. Safe travels back, friend. Lunch on me. And that's for
Thank you,
Brandon.
MJ. I appreciate that.
We
That's
have
very nice of you.
we have 2 questions here from Bob the Builder. Do you plan on traveling to Cali for the AEW pay-per-view, as well as do you think AEW Revolution ends up selling out?
That's a good question. I do not plan on going to San Francisco for the AEW Revolution pay-per-view.
What if Wrestlenomics got a lot more Patreon subscribers?
If Wrestlenomics
between
got a
now and
lot
then?
more Patreon subscribers, that would be on the table. 100% open to it. But it's just a lot more affordable for me to do these East Coast trips, which is I have gone to Chicago too, but that's another not far trip for me. But when it comes to like I've looked into flying to LA for WrestleMania or San Francisco for AEW Revolution, it gets quite expensive going all the way across the country for me.
Brandon, just take some bookings during WrestleMania weekend and make it like a little working vacation.
I'm not currently accepting bookings.
It's not as easy as you think it is right now.
And I'm not currently accepting bookings, and Chris Cole is currently not getting bookings. Did I answer the other question? What
Oh
was
no,
the
he asked about, do you think AEW Revolution ends up selling out?
Where is it right now? I'll have to pull
I think
up
it's at like
the.
a little under 7,000 was the last number I saw, which was a few days ago.
What
I
is the
would say
date on this? It's
unlikely,
in March.
unlikely to sell out would be my take.
Yeah, it is at 9,826.
Oh, oh, that's a lot more than I saw previously.
That is according to WrestleTix. I'm sorry, that's the estimated capacity. Scratch that.
Right.
My bad. That is estimated capacity 9,826. The tickets distributed is 6,921. 6,921.
Yeah.
So that leaves as far as what is on sale, 2,905 left to sell. So I would call that decisively not sold out, and we are getting, we're under a month here. I guess that's not going to sell out.
I think they can get to that 9,000 figure. I don't think they can get to what I would consider a true sellout in that building, which is probably around 13 or 14,000.
Is this an NBA?
This is the Golden State Warriors arena, yes.
Okay. That's it. You guys have plugs. You're muted, Gullo. You're ranting, but you're muted.
I'm just saying that we'll do it for super chats, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any plugs?
I have the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. You can find it right here on YouTube. I just had a new episode. I was joined by Rich Craich of the Flagship Wrestling Podcast, as well as voicesofwrestling.com. We had a long, almost 2-hour discussion talking about the discourse around AEW, the way we talk about AEW, the way that AEW seems to always have this air of pessimism around it when it comes to the sense of public conversation. And we do a thorough deep dive into why that is. I have kind of a pet theory of these 3 different categories of people who negatively influence AEW discourse and kind of how that impacts the company.
Chris Gullo, right?
Chris Gullo is like 2 of the 3 categories. I'm not going to lie. But
it's him and then his bow tie.
Yeah.
Bow tie does.
No, my 3 categories are Monday Night War revivalists, the skeptics for an alternative product, and of course the grifters and the charlatans. But I think it's a really, I think it,
you
it
mean
really
carnies. That's the word you use this concept. Yeah.
But it's gotten rave reviews so far. I think it's something I put a lot of thought into, kind of focusing on the kind of conversations that we have mainly over the internet on social media.
Where is this? Where can people find it?
They can find it right on YouTube. It's the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. You can go into my Twitter page at Jesse Collings and also check it out. There's going to be some news on the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast in the future.
News?
Good news.
Media rights deal?
One could describe it as a media rights deal, yes.
Okay.
Nice.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I was actually a guest about a week ago on the Honk If You Love Wrestling podcast. They talked to me about Wrestlenomics stuff and ring announcing and all that. And I will be this Saturday. I'll be in Erie, Pennsylvania, ring announcer Revenge for Wrestling, and then Sunday I'll be back in Buffalo doing stand up at Helium Comedy Club. So, want to see me do my other million things I do. So,
all right. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting. We'll talk to you next time.